Good evening, everyone. Hi, yeah, I'm actually on a bus in Alabama, so uh, Birmingham. Yeah, yeah. There's a Rainmakers conference, architectural conference that I got invited to, but I should be back in Lowell Saturday evening. No, no, a little ways from Florida still, but not quite. Um, a little. I'm getting there. Oh, sorry, I was saying the bus is stationary, a little sightseeing, so very good.
Troy, make sure you get over to Montgomery. Is that part of the tour when you're down there?
Yes, Saturday morning.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
terrific, terrific. I mean, a lot of history. A lot of it isn't so terrific, but the response to it has been, I think, pretty sensitively done. Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 31st, 2022 meeting of the Lowell Historic Board. Our only item on our agenda today is old business, hearing for DLHD-22-24, 733-735 Broadway Street. Application for a historic permit by the Boston Capital Development LLC for partial demolition, exterior rehabilitation, and new construction pursuant to the Lowell Historic District Act. This item has been continued from our March 14th, 2022 meeting. The hearing was continued at the request of the applicant to provide further information regarding the demolition portion of the project. At this time, would the applicant like to step forward and introduce yourself and present the project to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, fellow board members. My name is Rich Mazzocchi. I'm with Boston Capital Development. We're a developer based in Boston, and I'm here with Bill Martin of Martin, our counsel, Cliff Bomer from Davis Square Architects, and then I believe, Steve, are there others on Zoom?
Yeah.
Jeff Crowell
is there as well, and Aldrich.
Okay, so Jeff Crowell, who is with me at Boston Capital, and Daryl Aldrich with Davis Square Architects, and that's our development team. So we're very excited to be here tonight to present the 733 Broadway project, and would like to just give a quick update on other processes with the city. We did go to zoning board and received approval on December 13th. We also went to planning board on December 6th, and the project was continued for further discussion on a number of items. We're presenting to planning board on April 4th, this coming Monday. In addition, Merrimack Valley Food Bank, which currently owns and operates the property on site, they've continued to progress with their relocation process, and that's obviously part of the reason for us being interested in this redevelopment is their desire to relocate. We've also started the application process for state funding, for funding related to affordable housing development, and have made good progress with the state, have had a lot of positive discussions and some good momentum. Approvals with the city is a key component to really continue to advance that. One item I just wanted to point out before we dive into the details on design is, our original approach on this development planning. We did look at the building for redevelopment to preserve the entire building and potentially add to it. We reviewed that with Davis Square Architects, our engineers, as well as contractors, evaluated that. I did provide some follow-up information to the board related to that, and our determination was it's really not financially feasible given the cost to do an adaptive reuse of the entire building. Therefore, we're requesting the economic hardship and the partial demolition of the building combined with new construction. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Cliff to run through some background on the existing site as well as our proposed design. And Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cliff Bomer at Davis Square Architects, and thank you very much for hearing us tonight. Some of you know more about this development than others, but we started communications with the city, I think back early in November of last year, and have gotten a lot of feedback that has been terrific. It's helped us really think through this with several points that I think were really useful, that really helped us put the building more into context. I think that was really the biggest comment that we received was that people in Lowell, all of you are very familiar with a lot of new construction and adaptive reuse in Lowell and fitting in denser housing in a lot of situations. And I think there was a lot of the feedback we got was really make what we do not look like other buildings. It really needs to fit the site and be specific and sensitive to where it's sitting. And as you know, this development sits directly across from the historic canal, which is has a walkway on it that's going to be improved. So we're imagining that there will be a lot of views of the building from the canal walkway, of course, as well as from Broadway, which is an important artery in the street. But if we start with the drawings, I would like to make just a couple clarifying comments. You all have received the materials and presumably looked at them. But in the spirit of the kind of exchange that we've had so far, I want to be clear about just a couple small points. We have adapted or adopted our design to the comments we've heard. One thing that you won't be able to see in the drawings that you submitted, or that we submitted that you've seen, is we in all of our buildings, we do a lot of multifamily housing, really don't want mechanical equipment visible from the roof. And I realized in the set that you folks have, there isn't a roof plan in it. And I just want to make sure all of you know that our intent is to conceal the roof equipment so it won't be visible. We think we'll be able to do most of that without even screening any additional screening. We're pretty sure that we're obviously not at a point where we're specifying mechanical equipment, but we think there's a whole quadrant available on the, basically on the kind of northwest corner of the building. There's surprisingly few long views. Really, the only long view you get of the building is when you're, after you've passed the historic building that's right on the canal that the Housing Authority owns, coming from the south on Broadway. You'll have a broad view of the building looking down Ting Street. Obviously screened by the height of the building in the foreground, which gives us a lot of flexibility too. But if you're coming to the site from the north on Broadway, it's the bulk of the building is screened continuously until you're virtually in front of the building because of all the existing construction along the side of Broadway. I think you probably know there's some very regular, that is virtually identical multifamily buildings along that side of Broadway. Each of those is about 38 feet tall, and they're tightly spaced. So there's a lot of screening of the bulk of the building from that direction. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out because it was something that has come up a couple of times in our discussions, and I realized you wouldn't be able to tell that from the drawings, but I want to assure you that we've heard you, and we have no intention of having the mechanical equipment be an aesthetic feature on this building. So if we could maybe jump into the drawings, I'll quickly go through them. Jeff, are you running the slide? I'm not sure who's going to run the slide.
Yeah. Do you want me to share the presentation?
That'd be great. Well, I'll make it really quick, just point out highlights and leave time for you folks to ask any questions. So the existing context, this is looking down, actually this is pretty close to where I was describing, where you get a long view of the building looking down Ting Street. Ting Street runs parallel to the canal. It's running north from where we're looking. In our building, what you see of our building is a sort of a combination of pieces of it, but the piece that's closest to you is the loading dock, and then our building is the first 3 bays that go down along Ting Street, and they directly connect onto the Housing Authority property that was converted into senior housing development. That fence that you see here is screening a parking lot for the food bank. The cars are parked in those are all Housing Authority parking spaces along Ting Street. Rich has done a lot, and Boston Capital has done a lot of work on ensuring that we have open and free access along Tain Street, which was a critical piece because that really was the right place, we think, to put the vehicular access to the site. If you go to the next one. We are replacing that fence, by the way, as a part of the project. There we go. Okay, so there you're directly in front of the site, looking across the parking and loading area. For the food bank, the site is currently essentially 100% impervious surface. There's no existing stormwater management on the site. These are things that we are improving on drastically, I think, from the existing conditions from a site planning and sustainability perspective. The next shot is, here we are on Schaefer Street. So Schaefer Street's on the west side of the site. You may have noticed that on the, well, actually, you can see at this point that the four bays that you see on Schaefer Street are essentially two-story piece. The big blank wall, masonry wall, is actually a freezer. It was an add-on to the building to provide space for the food bank. We are proposing to fully remove that piece and restore all the rest of the facade that you see here on Tain Street. There's a little alley on the left-hand side of the historic piece that separates the Housing Authority property from the food bank property. The existing food bank building that you see on the left-hand side, it's a little bit over 2 feet away from the property line, and it runs pretty much parallel to the property line on the north side of the site. You can keep going. So this is the view. Now you've gone up Tain Street, and you notice here that the building is actually taller. Even though the site is very flat, there actually is a grade change. The east side of the site is lower than the west side of the site. So as you can see, you pick up sort of 2/3 of a story at grade on this side of the building. To the left is that loading dock piece. And we're proposing to preserve our piece of the building, which is actually first 4 bays before we get to the Housing Authority property that's been restored. Next shot. Here's the floor plan. The vehicular entry, as I mentioned before, is off of Tain Street. We have a parking garage with the parking spaces matching the unit count. We have 52 parking spaces. I'm sorry, I think we have 54 parking spaces and 52 units, so a little bit greater than 1. We are incorporating EV spaces into the plan and, of course, accessible spaces. It will be a naturally ventilated garage, and you'll see that from the building elevations where we've integrated grading into the facades of the building to provide for the ventilation for the parking garage. Schaefer Street, I think the biggest change that certainly the neighbors will feel on Schaefer Street is that existing freezer building is virtually on the property line of the neighbor to the south, the immediate neighbor to the south. And we're getting rid of that piece, so we're creating a green space on that side of the building. And our new facade will be, I think it's more than 20 feet away from the neighbor. So we think that's a nice improvement for that resident in that building and for the street in general. I think the next slide, actually going up a floor, you'll see better the pieces that we're proposing to preserve in the building. The darkened rendered pieces are existing building that we are restoring. The remainder of the building we are proposing to demolish. There are a lot of issues. Rich mentioned one issue associated with the an adaptive reuse of the building. It would be extremely challenging. We can go into more detail if you wish, but the other issues include the fact that, as I pointed out, the existing elevation along that whole north side is only 2 feet, roughly 2 feet away from the property line. There are building code issues associated with that, actually up to 3 feet. You're not allowed any openings on a building. So we would have quite a few technical issues to get over just to get started, which is a big part of the reason. The building code issues are another reason that we've concluded this is the way to go. Next, you can see how the floor plates stack. There are 2 elevators in the building, one at each wing of the building, or one sort of at the inside corner and the other at the southern end of the building where the lobby area is. Primary entry to the building is off of Broadway, and a secondary entry off you could come in the sidewalk of Schaefer Street as well. But primary entry is Broadway. Next slide, I think, is a render. I don't think much to say here, other than I think you probably saw from that second floor, we are setting back the new elevations from the historic elevations to really make the historic elevation that we're preserving pop more, make it more prominent on the street. Next slide. This is the view that you've seen a couple times now in the existing context. So some of the feedback, I think some of the best feedback we got was to really break up the length of the building, both vertically and horizontally, which we've done with layering in both directions. We're proposing some masonry in the building, a limited amount of masonry, those 2 kind of shoulders of the building that are on Broadway. This is the main Broadway entry to the building. We are building new sidewalks along that parking area in front of where those cars are parked. You see in the background, our piece of the building that we are preserving, as well as a very long extension of that same building height that makes up a portion of the Housing Authority property. The materials we're proposing for the building, other than the masonry at the shoulders of the building, are largely cementitious panels, probably a Semtech, or we like the panels that are homogeneous all the way through, creating a rain screen system in the building with reveals as you can see in this rendering. And we're combining that with contrasting clapboard pattern of cementitious siding on the upper levels. So the idea was really to work with some of the dimensions in the existing historic building, as well as replicating proportions of the window openings for all of the unit windows in the building. Next slide. Just you're getting a peek down where that alleyway is now, or on the Broadway side. Actually, that I misspoke. That's our space from the neighbor on the west side. We had originally proposed that area where the person is standing on the left as a kind of loading zone, but we've reworked that now to have a loading area on Broadway in front of the building and have a little courtyard space on that side of the building, which is the north side. Continuing along, this is the view on Schaefer Street. As you can see, there's the preserved part of those 5 bays on the historic building, and then our new building, which is set back from those, so we're preserving around the corner of those bays. As I pointed out before, we've increased the space between that neighbor and our building by about 20 feet, which we think really helps mitigate the scale of the building for the neighborhood. Our building is in scale perfectly with the with the Housing Authority building that's immediately to the east of it, which is also a 4-story building. That's a view, another view along Tate Street from the other direction, looking from the north, looking towards the south. And you see how much of the building that we're proposing to save wrapping around the corner, going back approximately to where that existing fence line is that lets you into the alley that separates the Housing Authority development from 733 Broadway. Elevations, obviously, because it's an L-shaped building with buildings in front, you'll only see the part of the building to the right, which is the Broadway part of the building. The buildings along, existing buildings along Broadway screen the rest of it, but this is the notion of the elevation, a similar treatment of bays, the kind of gold color is rendered here along with the base piece and 2 stories of lighter color on top. And that's working our way around. That's the Tate Street elevation. It was important to us to establish a nice rhythm on that street and to carry the dimension of the Housing Authority, which is first our building, of course, was first 4 bays, but then the Housing Authority continuing on towards the north. We thought that was a nice connection to make and carry through all the way up to that shoulder of the building right on Broadway, the masonry shoulder. And there's the Tate Street elevation. Same story here. There are, of course, buildings in the foreground for the majority of this elevation, but you can see that we're carrying that same idea all the way around the building. And the final elevation, I think it's from the Housing Authority side. Yeah. So on the right-hand side are those 3 bays that we're preserving in the existing building, and you can get a good idea here of the setback of the historic building from Schaefer Street on the right-hand side, along with some more subtle setbacks and modulations of the bays versus the main body of the building in the other parts of this drive. And that might be the last slide. I think it is, isn't it?
It is, yep.
Yeah, okay. I hope, I'm sorry it went so fast. Sometimes I think can't say enough about it, and other times I think I'm over talking it. But again, I think I mainly really want to thank all of you for the comments we've gotten so far, and I guess I can leave it at that and open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Is there anyone attending virtually or in person here in Lowell who wishes to speak in favor of this proposal? Asking a second time? Third time? I will mention that we did receive, the Historic Board did receive a letter from Danielle McFadden of the Greater Lowell Chamber of Commerce, who wished to express the organization's support for this project. So I want to make sure that that was entered into the record. Is there anyone here or attending virtually who at least wish to speak in opposition to this proposal? Second call for comments? Third call? Okay, with that, I'll open the floor up for questions and comments from the board members.
I have a question about parking. Is the parking garage entrance on Ting Street and the parking is under the building? Is that what that looks like?
Correct. Yes.
Well, the parking is on the first floor of the building.
The first floor of the building?
It's not.
It's not
Yes.
below grade?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Hi there, Lisa Cassidy. I'm wondering if you could speak to the color scheme again. It looks like you're taking the original elements and you're looking at the new shoulder sections to sort of match that type of brick color. And then you were saying your layered elements are separated by color So you're going to graduate from a medium color to a lighter color at the top? Okay. And are these, I mean, I see the virtual here. Are those similar to the colors you're proposing, or just
It's
sort
a-
of, defining the element, so to speak?
Well, let me say that I think I like the way you talked about it. That the intention is, and some of the feedback we've gotten was to keep the top of the building the lightest part of the building, and which we're showing here. We've run through a lot of different shades, trying out different shades. But the only way that, my experience certainly, because everybody's looking at different screens. I know my screen looks different, different from your screen. So I think it's fair to say that the masonry, we'd probably come close color-wise to a match with the existing building. The pieces, the interstitial pieces that are of the same height, those are intended to be hardy plank, or if not hardy, another brand of cementitious siding. I doubt we'd match it perfectly, but we do want to carry that line across. My experience has been we do mock-ups and get it out there in the light on the site, and that's really where the decisions get made. But you've identified the intent, I think, of the scheme. Some of the feedback, other feedback we got, at one point we had much greater contrast in the cornice, for example, at the top of the fourth floor. We had a much greater contrast of that detailing up there, and we've toned that down quite a lot. And I think we believe that was the right move. I'm not sure whether you folks generally like to review mock-ups. We are completely open to that. Virtually every town we do buildings in, there's somebody in the town that really wants to see the mock-up to make sure that we're not going crazy.
I'm a color person, so I'm always curious about color, and I do like the idea of like defining the various layers. I think it makes the building more attractive, but I'm never a big fan of something super bold, in the sense that would outpower the historic elements, so to speak. Then all of a sudden you lose those. And I'm also a big fan of taking the period color and definitely incorporating that in the elements, which you've done along the front side.
I am completely sympathetic with that. I think we're on the side of more subtle color, I think. And so I'm not exactly sure what you're seeing from where you're sitting, but we are very open to review of the mock-up. We're used to working that way. We like working that way. We don't want anybody to be surprised.
Yeah, right. And the hardy can be painted any color you want, so.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be. But, the mock-ups we do are usually pretty substantial in size. They're usually, 8 to 10 feet long, 6 or 8 feet tall. And put it out really where the building is, so you can get a good sense of the light.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the board have comments?
I do. This is Carrie Janess. I recognize there's not a lot of green, sort of vegetation elements there now, but I was just curious if you have any kind of landscaping plan, or, the drawings are pretty stark, and obviously it's a work in progress, but.
Yes, we do. With our planning board submission, and I think our zoning board submission, there is a landscape plan We haven't retained the landscape architect yet, but we're using Hancock Engineering, who did the landscape plan for us. And we could call that, Jeff, do you have that plan? We could call it up. It wasn't part of this submission. We do have a landscape plan, and it's very important to us because you're exactly right. And look at that street. The street there now is pretty harsh. And we are proposing plantings along there, along our new fencing, along that side of the street. And we have plantings in the space on Schaefer Street. Because we opened up that space between us and the neighbor, we're planting there. If we could look at the plan, you'll see that actually at the end of the day, we ended up with quite a bit of open space. As I started by pointing out, right now it's 100% impervious space. So we're actually picking up a lot of usable space on site and do intend to have a robust landscape plan. At this point, I would characterize it as schematic, but it would certainly be nothing less than what we're showing.
That's great. That's great to hear. I mean, I'm always concerned when, essentially you're demolishing a good chunk of the building. I want whatever's going up to be an improvement over what's there to, sort of balance that out. And like I said, obviously there's not much there now. So if you're engaging a landscape architect and putting energy into that, that's great to hear.
Oh, good. And I'll tell you a couple other things too that we're looking forward to. And this came actually from a lot of just sort of head adjustment of really spending a lot of time thinking of the experience along Ting Street, and especially knowing that directly across Ting Street is a lot of usable outdoor space that's going to be even better. So we wanted to make a connection with that, which is why we do have landscaping on that side of the street, but we're also improving the existing sidewalk. You don't see, I'm looking at the picture on my screen, but the existing sidewalk, because of the housing authority parking, the overhang of the cars, it leaves about 2 feet of walking space, and it's a really beat up bituminous walkway right now. We're getting a city compliant wide sidewalk along there with some landscaping, and I think really making a big improvement to the pathway for all the residents in the housing authority development as well, which is much larger than our development.
That's great. That's great. Well, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment on your landscaping plan. I'm just looking at this without knowing the square footage of your parking area in total. You're most likely going to be required to put a certain amount of trees and green within that area, within the parking area. Planning board will look at that and ask that question. I don't recall, the square footage, the threshold of the square footage, but it looks like you're gonna have to do that. And along any new sidewalks too, look at it very closely.
Yep.
And in the same vein, what about outdoor lighting, outside lighting? Do you have a plan for that?
We do. Actually, we do have a lighting plan as well that was submitted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rich and Jeff, was that submitted with the zoning board submission or the planning board submission? But we do have a lighting plan, and we're obviously happy to share that with you folks. It's already with a couple other boards in
We
town.
would be interested in the design and, what the fixtures look like. And
Okay, that was submitted with planning board, excuse me. So yeah, that is submitted with the planning board materials that went in for the meeting coming up on the 4th.
Yeah, okay. That's all I have.
I will point out that, like we do in all towns, the lighting plan is a really important one. We certainly would use all dark sky compliant fixtures. Right now, it's not that way. We don't want any spillage off of our site with any of our lighting. And we really hope to improve, improve the skyscape, nighttime skyscape with our fixture selection. And remember that our parking is all inside. All the parking is within the building envelope of the building, or the building footprint, excuse me.
Troy, do you have any comments? I know that you were involved with the design review process and weighed in a lot at that stage of the review.
Yes, I just have a comment regarding detail of the vertical corner trim pieces for the hardy plank. I didn't see any of those on the elevation. So my question to you, Cliff, I mean, are you gonna like finish the corners with a vertical piece? Because usually when the hardy plank abuts to each other, it's a messy detail.
That's right. Well, actually, Daryl is on. We are going to try to do continuous around the corners. That's a good catch, Troy. We talked about that, and we have had some experience with successfully detailing outside corners with clapboard. If it turned out that we can't do it, we'd probably go with either a metal piece that is shaped to receive it at the corner, so it still is a minimal treatment, or a minimal trim piece that creates kind of ground in the corner that the siding butts into. But I'm glad you caught that, because the intent was not to heavily outline the bays. So that's our position right now. That's the look we'd like to achieve.
Okay, no, thank you. And so, yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have some type of, graphic. Is that 2 inches wide, 4 inches wide, etc.
Yeah.
So we could see how it looks visually.
Shoot, Troy, your bus must be moving or something. I will point out that, because I'm looking at the perspectives right now, and the paneling, we don't need any corner pieces on that, because that's going to be rain screen. So there's actually a void behind there. So we'll be able to detail the paneling pretty, relatively easily without having corner pieces in the panels.
Got it. No, that makes sense for that condition.
And most of the clapboards, except at the upper levels, are within a fixed space. But yes, we're happy to provide you with those details.
Okay, thank you.
I do not have any questions myself to add, but I do want to express my appreciation to Cliff and your team and to the applicant for your willingness to work with us during the design review process to work through some of the details of their design. And I feel like the tweaks that we were able to come to some consensus on really improved the project and has maximized its compatibility with its historic setting. So I just want to make sure that you hear that from us, because I think that was a key process to getting us to here today.
Well, we all feel the same way. We benefited greatly from it. We thank you for that.
Good. Well, if there are no further questions from board members, I will entertain a motion at this point.
I move to approve historic permit DL HD 2224, 733 to 735 Broadway Street, according to the 4 conditions set out by the Lowell Historic Board Administrator concerning submittal, review, and approval.
I will second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, we have unanimous approval. Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. See you all soon.
Thank you, Cliff.
All righty. Sir Troy, have fun down there. There's a lot to do in Alabama. I spent a lot of time there. All right, bye-bye.
Take care, Cliff. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome. Thank you for coming in. Before we adjourn, Steve, is there anything you need to mention to us moving forward? Okay. Okay.
I move to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in for this special hearing. And maybe we'll see you next month. Maybe we won't. We'll get an update from Steve on that later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Troy, for
Thank you.
Bye,
patching yourself in
everybody.
from afar. Appreciate it.
No,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Me too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
The guy in the back.